Right, it's all yours, Ashley.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Welcome to this meeting of the Joint Waste Collections Services Committee. We have an agenda which is reasonably full before us. First of all, apologies for absence. And I think Catherine said that we're all here, that's supposed to be here. No
Yes,
apologies.
but we've, I know our county council councillors aren't able to make this meeting, so apologies from them.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Agenda item 2, minutes of last meeting. To receive and confirm as being a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of June. Any alterations, corrections, amendments to that? No, good. Okay, we'll accept that as a true and accurate record. Thank you for those, Catherine. Declaration of interests. Members are asked to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests in respect of any matters to be considered at this meeting. Are there any interests to declare? No. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we're on to item 4, which is Waste Management Internal Audit Annual Report. Covers pages 7 to 18 of our agenda. To receive a report setting out the findings of the annual audit of Joint Waste Solutions. Who is taking the lead on that? Jo. Right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Tilling. I mean, I didn't want to go into too much detail because obviously the report is what it is, and there's a short cover paper just to set out some background. So following the audit, we reviewed the report with the board and are showing here for sort of completeness and transparency. So the audits of JWS or our service area were initially undertaken by Surrey Heathborough Council after the start of the contract, but it was agreed subsequently to share the responsibility amongst the 4 authorities in rotation, and Woking's auditors undertook this most recent review. We're happy that there's no recommendations, and obviously note the commentary regarding complaints recording though. Just as by way of update on that, is the Elmbridge IT forms that they use to report service issues or customers log issues through are now integrated with Amy's Whitespace system, and customer service staff in Mole Valley are also logging complaints through the same IT system. We are now actually getting, as part of the monthly service report that we review in contract meetings with Amy, complaints data categorised and fed back in the same way. So that's a real positive step in the right direction there. I'll just add as well, because it's of interest to me, it's already resulted in a bit of action for us to kind of dig into some of the complaints that are categorised as relating to miscollections, because those tend to be the highest category that we see in those statistics that we get now monthly. So it's helping us to see what we can do to review the nature of those complaints and see what's driving those volumes and see what we can do to improve upon that. So yeah, hopefully we've started to take on board the feedback from that report and move on with it. I was going to leave it there, so if anyone's got any questions, I think the only final thing to add is we're talking to Ray at Elmbridge about scheduling Elmbridge auditors to undertake the next review.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from those present? No? Oh, yes, Peter.
I'm obviously not on your radar, Ashley.
No, well, you again, you've moved right to the top of the screen, so I can't see your head or your hand.
Right, okay. You can't see my okay, digital hand. No problem. Just a quick one. I think you've touched on it there, Jo, but you say in the report that management advised that work is underway to bring these in line with Surrey Heath and WBC. What work is actually being undertaken there?
So because customers or residents in Woking and Surrey Heath report any service issues via the Amy Contact Centre, the way those any complaints were recorded was already standard across those 2. The work that's been going on in the background in Mole Valley and Elmbridge is to make sure that the systems that they use in their contact centres and for issues logging are feeding directly into Whitespace. So although we had complaints maybe sitting in other systems, they weren't kind of being recorded in a uniform way where it comes to the collection and street services. But the Elmbridge customer service team and the JWS team are now all using forms that feed into that system and also the Mole Valley Customer Service Unit are also logging complaints directly there. So it means that they're all sitting in the same place and they are all being categorised with the same sort of, reasons for the background for the complaint. So we can see the stats in a slightly more consistent way across the four.
Mhm.
I think there's still some work to be done to make sure that those forms are being used in the same way by the different contact teams. Those are the sorts of discrepancies you might need to draw out if they're still sort of using them in a slightly different way. But ultimately, yeah, we're seeing everything collated in one place and categorised uniformly.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Joe. No more questions. I think we'll move on to agenda item 5. So this is the reports we have on pages 19 to 32, the quarterly waste and recycling performance report for Q1 of this financial year.
Thank you, Councillor. Let me just share my screen. And we'll keep... Can everyone see that? Is that all good?
Yep.
Great, perfect. So yeah, just going to go through the performance. So this is the recycling performance for Q1. This is just showing the comparison for the rolling tonnages up to June 23 to June, comparing it to June 22. As you can see, tonnages are lower than the previous year. That's our recognizable trend of the tonnages going down. If you can see for the joint authority areas, it's mostly following the pattern, apart from Garden. Garden can be explained just because this is still comparing it to the year where we had suspensions and disruptions to the service. So that's why green is increasingly high. The other issue that you might see that is quite an interesting factor is DMR. DMR is slightly higher than expected, as in a bigger decrease than expected compared to the Surrey average. We reviewed the contamination rates in the MRF reports and can't see anything obvious. There might be something in Surrey Heath. So that is just one thing we've kind of flagged up and that we will be reviewing for the next quarter. These is the recycling rates. So the top table is just the quarterly recycle rate compared to last year. And then the bottom one is the recycling rate for the 12-month average. You can see we've gone increased across the board, and that is probably due to garden waste as a factor. If we go to the charts, so this is recycling performances DMR, nothing unusual here. Once again, on the left, it's the Surrey Environmental Partnership, and on the right, it's the Joint Contract Authorities. Obviously, the volumes are different, but the pattern is still the same. We are seeing a decrease in tonnages. Food, exactly the same. Volumes are different, but the decrease, the trends are similar, and we're seeing this trend. Garden, obviously, we're slightly different in the joint authorities, and that's just due to the disruption of our service, but overall, the trend is the same. And for residual waste, it's the same. The decrease is not as much as the other material types, but the trend is the same. So now we'll go to AMI KPIs. Just to let you know, for the board members, this had for Elmbridge, actually for all of them, the numbers have slightly updated as we found some small errors in the data that we've fixed and rectified. So this is Elmbridge's one. The increase in KPIs 1 to 3 is probably due in May and June, is due to the garden rounds not completing it in May and June, and that has led to the increase in miscollections and effect, and it'll be the driving force for the other KPIs increasing. So that is for Elmbridge. For Mole Valley, in target, there's nothing unusual here. Slight increases in May and June, but overall in target. Surrey Heath, pretty much stable as well. May and June slightly higher than April, but nothing significant to flag up here. And Woking is the same. some increases in May and June, but still within target and nothing significant to flag up. That is it for me, but I'm open to any questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Kingsley. Can I just ask about your second table, which was recycling rate, which
Yeah.
I think was something sort of the order of 40-something%. Is that a percentage of the total tonnage of waste collected, which is recycling waste? Or does it reflect the amount of waste that is then properly recycled? And I think, because I'd imagine from every collected tonnage, there's a fair amount is contaminated, or it's not actually going for any recycling. So what do those rates actually relate to?
So this table right here, Councillor, can you see that table? Sorry.
Yes.
So we do a little bit of calculations in the background, and these should reflect the recycling that's actually recycled. So we have removed all the stuff that is contaminated and put that down in the denominator of the formula. So if you see the formula, if the recycling rate is how much has been recycled in the district or borough, the new numerator is just the material that's been recycled, food, garden, and DMR, and the denominator will be anything that wasn't recycled and household waste.
Right. So if we look at the all of Surrey then, so we are recycling something like 56%. So of all the DMR collected, 56% is then being recycled. Is that what we're saying?
So no. all the waste collected, 56% is being recycled.
Is recyclable waste.
Or composted, yeah.
Right, okay. So do we know that of the DMR that is collected, how much is then properly being recycled? Because I imagine that at the MRFs, when the DMR is collected, some of it is not recycled, some is contaminated,
yeah.
some has to be set aside because it's not properly recyclable waste.
Yes.
So any idea of those figures of how much is actually properly recycled?
So we do have those figures. Give me 2 seconds and I'll give you they're not in the reports.
I was going to say, looking at them very recently, I think for the joint contract authorities that deliver to Grundon, it's probably around 8 or 9% is the current sort of reject rate that's being reported.
That's correct, Joe. And
the Surrey Heath material that goes to Viridor, I think, is a slightly higher reject rate at the moment, but we see that as on a par with the other authorities that are delivering to that site. So there seems to be they don't outlie the others in terms of material that's going into Viridor. They're quite consistent.
Yeah, that is correct.
I appreciate that's a bit of a vague time-filling answer for Kingsley, but that was just we were only looking at them recently, so
but Joe is very close to those numbers. I know Grundon's is definitely 8 to 9%. I'm just trying to get the Viridor number. But my spreadsheets are not opening. So the Viridor number for Surrey Heath, I've got it, recently is around, so it's in Q4, unfortunately it went up to about 17%, but between quarters 1 to 3 it was between 6 to 9%. However, as Joe mentioned, in Q4 all the other boroughs that are going to Viridor have reached quite high teens, so even though it has been quite a big jump, it is in line with the other districts and boroughs.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that's useful to know. So actually, a fairly small percentage is actually rejected. Most of that waste that's collected is properly recycled.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Second question.
Tilling, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. Just to add to that, it is, and I think what it's fair to say though is across the board we have started to see increases in contamination levels. So within SEP 2025, if you recall, we've got a target in there to try and keep contamination of the dry mixed recycling below 8%. Until this kind of last 12 months, we have been doing that across the board in Surrey. What we have seen as an average across Surrey, though, is we're now around about 10% and gradually moving towards 11%. So we have identified the, the SEP work programme for next year may have a focus more towards contamination levels and trying to bring those dry contamination levels back down. And then if that is the case, depending on what's happening in the joint contract areas, it may be that we reflect that through into the work programme here as well, so that we can tackle any increases across the joint contract authorities.
Okay, lovely. Yeah, good. That's useful. And because as an Elmbridge councillor, if I can just come to the Elmbridge figures, I was a little bit alarmed by the increase in missed collections. It seems to have gone up enormously, and you're saying that's largely because of vehicles not being available. What's being done to tackle that?
Hi, Councillor Tilling, I can take that question for you.
Yeah, thank you.
So most recently, we've been seeing an increase in delays in terms of waiting for third parties to repair our vehicles. So a lot of the vehicles in Elmbridge are Mercedes vehicles, which are at a third party in Heathrow. So we've got 4 to 5 vehicles that have been stuck there for a number of weeks now. So we have hired in additional vehicles to cover those because we know they are off the road. But what that does is it depletes our pool of spare vehicles that we also have on the contract. So at the minute, if a garden waste vehicle breaks down, we tend to wait for that vehicle to be repaired before it gets back on the road, just because we have got a real shortage of vehicles. Now, we recognise that that's a poor service we're receiving from our third parties. So we've recently just had a new starter join our contract on Monday, who is a chap who's going to take on those third party relationships in terms of improving the service that we're receiving and looking at the contracts with them, etc. So we are aware there's an issue. We're working to make it better, but we are facing issues such as waiting 2 weeks for a windscreen on a vehicle, which isn't good enough. But we are working on it.
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks, Danielle, for that. I'm assuming that on the whole, the misbin collections are revisited, so they don't remain as misbins. It's just a delayed collection service. Is that right?
Yeah, so for those residents that are reporting missed on, for example, if they report a miss today because the round is incomplete, the garden waste crews in Elmbridge will revisit that address first thing tomorrow morning and complete the outstanding work before they start on the Friday's work. But it's unfortunate there is a proportion of residents that are being visited a day late. But what we can demonstrate is that the missed collections in Elmbridge are related to those garden waste rounds. I've just done a review of the depot this morning, and the rest of the mainline rounds and food waste rounds are not breaching the target that they're set in terms of weekly missed collections, which means, we're confident there's not a performance issue in the depot. It's more to do with the resources they've got available and us supporting them to make sure they can keep their crews out on the road.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, well, thank you for the steps you're taking to remedy that. Right, and any other questions? Yes, Peter.
Actually, Nick was before me.
Okay, yeah, happy to go to Nick.
Thank you, Peter. I was happy to wait. It was a question about the Surrey Heath data, Kingsley, and in relation particularly to textiles and small electricals, where we seem to have had quite a dramatic drop in recycling rates for both of those over the last 12 months or over the last year from June to June. Has there been an analysis as to why? And I appreciate they're not big tonnages in comparison to our DMR or garden waste, but it's still notable.
Yeah, so something has been bubbling in the background already for this, but so there's nothing obvious intelligence-wise of why tonnage is decreasing. So what we're doing is we're going and reviewing our contractors to see if we've missed any data. So there is some data when it gets uploaded to our system, it takes a bit of a delay to when the report is written. So intelligence-wise regarding tonnages decreasing, nothing obvious, nothing that's been flagged up. So now we're going back to our contractors to chase them up to see if they've not provided us the tonnage data, which is happening right now. So we will update all of that for the next quarter, but that is what our current status is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Peter.
Yeah, it's a couple of questions actually. On page 24, you say that this is the section about working. It should also be noted that KPI 13, etc. Unable to separate Surrey, Heath, and Woking data. Is there anything that can be done about that at all?
So that's Joker might elaborate on that, but
Yeah.
to be honest, we haven't had that data since April 22, I believe.
It says here April, data since April. It doesn't say which year, which was actually which was my second question.
Yeah, so yeah,
why have we not had that data?
So we have not received that data, and I don't believe we can separate that information out, can we, Joe?
Yeah, so I'll try and answer both parts of the question. In terms of the data, we used to receive some monthly statistics from the Amy call centre regarding response times. That data is not coming in the same way, which is allowing us to necessarily calculate the performance in line with that KPI. However, in our monthly service reports, there is some information provided as to whether those targets are being met, and we'll look to progress the conversations with Amy to try and ensure that we can recover, calculate that figure, backdate it as far as we need to when the data was missing, and catch up, if you like, on those statistics. In terms of the separation, no, the call centre data, there is a single number for the call centre which takes calls from Surrey, Heath and Woking. There are some options once you get through to that number as to the reason for your call, so we can separate out calls that are for the Gardenway service, renewals type inquiries, or other queries about the collection and street services, but we can't, the data doesn't allow it to be distinguished between whether that call has come from Woking resident or a Surrey Heath one. So it's the functionality of the call centre sort of reporting system that means it can't identify, because there's a single number that both Surrey Heath and residents use, Woking residents use.
So if they were to register one of those issues online, then surely that does separate them, because
That's
you have
correct.
to put postcode. Yeah,
But
so it's really only the phone.
Yeah, the KPI 13 is less about a service in an area and more about the contact centre's ability to meet their required response times in terms of how quickly they answer a call. So all the other KPIs that are area specific in terms of service delivery absolutely are separated out, but because this one is about the call centre performance specifically, and there is a single number in use for both areas, it's a collated figure for both.
Right, okay. I think I understand. The Kings, it'd be useful when we see the KPIs. Could you go back to the KPI slides for each preferably Woking, it doesn't really matter. I just wanted to question, it would be helpful for me, I don't know whether it would help anybody else, if we could actually see what those, so the KPIs, if we could see what the target is, because you said, for example, 50 is within tolerance, whatever. Would it be helpful for me to know what the bracket of tolerance is, if possible?
Yeah, I can definitely include that in the next set. For the KPI 1, which is miscollections per 100,000, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, is 80.
Right, okay.
That's right, yes.
Right, so I mean, it gives us a good idea of where we stand, and sort of roughly in the 50 out of 80, that seems okay to me. On page 38, sorry to, page 38, I said page 38. Have we got, is this part of your report, Kingsley, or have I gone too far?
No, you've gone too far forward there, Peter.
Okay, no worries, I'll come back to that. Okay, thank you, that's what I've got to ask at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Can't see any other hands up. Good, okay, thank you for that, Kingsley.
Thank you, Councillor.
Next item 6, is the quarterly budget report, pages 33 to 36. Is that Joe?
No, I think we have Jean here to present that one.
I can't.
Sorry, I was struggling to unmute, so I'm fine now. Right, so it's a bit of a good news story if we look at underspends as good news. So the contracts in the budget's in 3 sections. You've got the contract management office side of it, so that's the JWS and overhead side. So against a 2.6 million budget, we've got a 2.5 million spend or forecast spend for the year. So that's on that side of the budget. There's an £82,000 forecast underspend, of which £75,000 is on salaries, mainly vacancies within the service. Then you've got the main element of the contract. So that's into the main contract's in two bits. We've got the core budget and we've got a variable budget. On the core budget, which is a 14.3 million budget, we've got a forecast spend of 13.9 million. So we're currently showing a 410,000 forecast underspend in that budget. Now, the main reason for that is that we'd budgeted for a 10% inflation rate, and it's only coming in at about 6.85, which is the January calculated figure that gets used. So at the time they estimated the budgets, they didn't know what the figure would be that would be applied to the contract. So that's why we've got that underspend. On the variable budget, there's a budget set for 2.7 million, of which we've got spend of 2.6 million. So that's a 78,000 underspend in that area for the same reason. I think there's a little bit of dispute as to, I think that what date we take. I think there's been sort of queries from Amy on what date we should take, and that would make a very small difference to the amount should we go with theirs. But I think the issue is we shouldn't be chopping and changing what dates we use. We've used that's sort of the continuing practice that we've used. We shouldn't be changing it, and if we did, we'd change it going back to the start of the contract, and they would lose doing that. So we wouldn't chop and change to suit during the contract.
Okay.
So I think that's it. So I don't know, has anyone got any questions around?
Just thinking about the 6.85% inflation figure then from January 23, that seems to be below CPI for January 23. It seems quite a low figure, because I thought in January we were up to about 10 or 11% inflation.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's RPI or CPI. I'm not sure that, because I'm very new to the organisation. I'm not sure if someone knows where we take that number.
I can help with that question. The uplift that's applied to the contract rates each year has three components. One of them is CPI, one of them is a labour index published by ONS, and the third one is a fuel index. They have slightly different weightings, but there's a calculation done to take all of those three indices into account and create the uplift. So it's not purely based on a single index rate. So that's why it will vary from figures that you may have seen published elsewhere.
Right.
Thank you, Jo.
Yeah, thank you, Jo. That's useful. I'm just thinking about the underspend £75,000 due to having some vacant posts. I think there was a bit of sort of reorganisation of responsibilities last year and the year before. Are we expecting those vacant posts to be filled, or are we expecting there to be another underspend on salaries next year?
I think that's more a question for JWS on.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm happy to take that one, Jean. I couldn't get off mute.
I had the same.
So it's a bit of a mix. In answer to your question, Councillor Tilling, we'll be looking at fulfilling some of the vacancies that we're carrying. To give you an example, we haven't backfilled Neil since he left, and we are feeling the pinch of not having somebody in that kind of commercial role. So we will be looking to fill that. We've also been kind of running a trial of me carrying both directors' positions. And at some point we will need to make a decision as to whether we sustain that going forwards, or whether we do look to fulfil the director's vacancy as well. We're also carrying at the moment a couple of operational posts as vacancies, so operation officers and monitoring officers, which we are looking to fill, but we have been struggling to recruit the right quality of candidates.
Right, okay. Right, any other questions on the budget and finance report? No, okay, good. Thank you for that, Jean. And Danielle, item number 7, Amy Improvement Plan Update.
Thank you, Councillor Tilling. I will attempt to share my screen. Can we see?
Yes, we've got that.
Excellent. Okie doke. So just for today, then I've prepared an update for you just on health and safety. I'll talk briefly about the service. We've touched on some of that already with the non-completion of garden waste rounds, but I'll cover a service update, an update on business continuity, an update on the improvement plans, and then just finally touching on the progress with the replacement sweeper update, which I know has been mentioned in this forum previously. So firstly, on to health and safety. Unfortunately, on the 31st of July, one of our waste collection operatives was struck by a third-party vehicle whilst carrying out their duties. This is unfortunately not a trend that is specific to the Surrey area, and we're seeing it also across other areas of our business, both in waste collections and traffic management. So fortunately, this chap was okay, but he was hit by the vehicle that was overtaking the waste collection vehicle and hadn't slowed down. So we're doing a lot of work internally around looking at our vehicles and increasing the warnings to residents when they're passing the vehicles. If any of you have seen a waste collection vehicle out and about, you'll agree that there are many orange beacons currently on the vehicles already. And we don't feel like we've got an opportunity to increase the lighting on the vehicles given the amount that's already on there. So at the bottom of this slide here, you'll see a graphic that is something that can be put in the rear of the vehicle. So it hangs down like a set of curtains from the rear of the vehicle where the waste gets tipped. And that's just to try and encourage residents that are approaching the vehicle to slow down on their approach. We're also looking at other methods around kind of sounds that can be played as vehicles are approaching to give warning to the loaders. And we're doing a lot of work with our loaders internally around being aware of their kind of surroundings and taking time to look when crossing the road. But this is the second incident we've had of someone being hit by a car in Surrey. And I know of 2 others up on our Trafford contract as well. So it is becoming more and more frequent, and our aim is to try and tackle it before something serious happens. So I know that we're giving the comms to Joe and the team at JWS, and we'll hopefully be able to do something jointly in terms of getting some messaging out there to the public. But when that comes around, it would just really appreciate your support in trying to make it a safer working environment for our teams out there. Moving on to a service update. So Elmbridge, you'll see there that from the KPI performance from June, July and August, it's massively improved since June, where we had a real issue with garden waste not completing on the scheduled day. That improved through July, August due to the reduction in tonnages, and we've seen a further reduction in September. For the Elmbridge KPI performance. Having reviewed it this week, we looked at those missed assisted collections on there, and I believe there was in the region of 45 in previous months, and the depot are down to just 10 for this month. So a real marked improvement from Elmbridge on those missed assisted collections, and we'll continue to monitor that and challenge the crews on those assisted collections and also the repeat missed collections. Mole Valley have had a pretty stable service. They've been fortunate enough not to be impacted too much by garden waste tonnages. They tend to struggle on a Thursday with it being quite a busy day for them, but because they have an easier Friday, they have the opportunity to catch up, so we don't see too much of an issue in Mole Valley. Surrey Heath and Woking, we had a few issues back in the summer, but that was due to vehicle breakdowns. There was an issue at Envar, one of the garden waste tipping facility for Woking and Surrey Heath, whereby the ground conditions meant that the vehicles were frequently getting damaged in there with their mud guards coming off, etc. So when that happens, the vehicles have to stay there and await repair, which caused a delay to some rounds. But outside of that, the service is generally very positive in Woking and Surrey Heath. Just an update on the winter leafing, as I know we are fast approaching that time of year. So I've had confirmation this week that we've got 2 additional large sweepers guaranteed to come into sites from week commencing the 16th of October. And we've already sourced the staff, the drivers and the assistants to be out in those additional vehicles carrying out leafing duties. We have set schedules for those leafing routes, but we are open to discuss those weekly with JWS at our ops meeting. And if we need to add or remove any roads from those based on demand across the boroughs, we're happy to do so. So we're happy to be fluid in terms of areas that those additional routes are visiting. On to the business continuity update. So the final refreshed business continuity plan has been submitted now. We are still at the stage whereby we need a third party to come in and test the effectiveness of that plan, but that is done now and has been communicated across the contract. With potential industrial action on the horizon, we're having individual meetings with JWS to come up with some specific plans around what might be the scenarios if industrial action was to take place. That's linked to the pay review for this year, which was due in April. So Mole Valley have accepted the pay offer, so there is no chance of industrial action in Mole Valley anymore. But there is a potential for industrial action at Elmbridge, Surrey Heath and Woking, and we won't get any further update on that until after the 9th of October, when their current ballot is due to end. We remain committed to informing JWS of any updates around the potential industrial action and are keen to kind of work alongside them to make sure that services are delivered in line with expectations of the wider contract. An update on our improvement plan and some things that we've been ticking off throughout the year so far. So we've really been able to push the use of the employee assistance programme this year. I think it's fair to say that the number of employees struggling with mental health issues around current financial pressures this year is increasing. So we've increased our support that's available to them. So we have the EAP, but we've also now got a private GP service whereby members of our workforce and their families are able to access free video consultations with GPs, which they found really useful when they can't get into their own GP, especially due to being at work at kind of that prime time in the morning, whereby they'd be required to phone or contact their GP for an appointment. In terms of route optimisation, we're making progress in Woking, Surrey Heath and Elmbridge to ensure that all the base data we have for rounds is correct within white space. And options are being discussed at a senior level on the contract for the best way forward in terms of whether there's some small opportunities we can take to improve the service delivery and efficiency, or whether we should do some more larger whole-scale change. We've also identified other efficiencies in areas such as street cleaning and the workshop functions. Increasing the food waste. So Amy have supported the JWS projects team to successfully roll out additional food waste collections to 100 communal properties in Mole Valley. There are also plans to support the same project in Elmbridge with a startup meeting taking place next week. And as I mentioned, the fleet and maintenance is causing us a significant amount of pain at the minute. So we've increased the number of suppliers that we're able to use across the network. This reduces vehicle downtime as we are waiting less time for MOT slots. We've formed direct relationships with our biggest suppliers, Mercedes, Iveco and Dennis, to improve the supply of parts. And we're looking at a restructure of the workshop so that we can get more support into the Woking depot, which don't have a workshop of their own. Just a final page on the sweeper and cage replacement. So the summary of the project is that there are 13 caged vehicles that are due replacement and 9 compact sweepers. Amy have put a proposal forward to not replace those cage vehicles as we don't see issues with them in terms of maintenance and off-road times. So we've put a proposal forward to not renew those and just ensure that they are maintained to the required standard throughout the rest of the contract. And then we'd like to reduce the compact sweepers, which are the small sweepers across the contract, and replace them with large mechanical sweepers, as the workload that you get out of them is much more efficient than the small sweepers. Talks on that are ongoing. There are meetings in the diary, and we look forward to progress with that as soon as we know what direction we're going in. That's all I've got. Thank you, Councillor Tilling, and open to any questions if we've got any.
Okay, thank you very much, Danielle. One from me then to kick off. I'm assuming then the pay offer is the same across all 4 boroughs and districts. Is that correct? Or is there any, was there any difference in the pay offer to Mole Valley that might make it acceptable there, but not in the other 3 boroughs and districts?
They are all the same, Councillor Tilling.
Okay. And do we get any hint of whether is it just pay that is the issue, or is it conditions as well in those other 3 depots?
No, the talks are solely on the pay review, and we've had feedback from the unions that we work with that you know, outside of that, they included other questions within their communications with the employees, and the employees reported otherwise, that they were very happy in the workplace.
Okay, good. Thanks very much. Any other questions? Rosemary.
Thank you. I may have missed this, but Danielle, when you talked about route optimization, you didn't mention Mole Valley. Is that because it's considered okay at the moment, or?
So I can answer that for you. So Mole Valley have most recently had a route optimization, and whilst that doesn't feel most recent now, as it was a couple of years ago, they have had a full round rebalance, taking into consideration kind of the best way of working there. So in terms of impact to residents and kind of priorities for us, Mole Valley are kind of further on the back burner to be revisited, because they have already had that carried out at their depot.
Okay, thank you. And can I just ask about street sweeping? I think you said you're looking at increasing efficiency measures.
Yes.
I just wondered what those involve.
So we recently had some input from a third party who's got an extensive knowledge in kind of street cleansing, and he's provided us with some suggestions in terms of changing the ways of working. So some of that ranges from the amount of people that are deployed in vehicles to the types of vehicles that are being used, so that we can get the best out of our resources and increase the outputs of the street cleansing, particularly in Mole Valley, where you've got the mix of kind of town areas and rural areas. So he's given us suggestions in terms of what the best equipment is and the best number of people we can have out on each of those routes to improve the service there.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes, Peter.
Presumably, if we're going to reduce the number of road sweepers down to 2, does that mean that we are going to cut costs in terms of staffing as well?
That's not reducing overall sweepers. It's replacing smaller sweepers with larger sweepers. So it's not that we're reducing the sweepers down to 2. It's just that after discussions with our street cleansing teams, it's been suggested that the more efficient way of working is to have extra large mechanical sweepers out, because they can carry a much greater payload and are much more efficient at travelling the distances between areas, whereas the small mechanical sweepers are not very good at driving to and from locations such as Camberley Depot out to Windlesham, for example.
So you're replacing 2 small ones with 2 big ones, effectively.
You would replace, so when you have a large mechanical sweeper, it's beneficial to have a second person in that vehicle to get out and leaf blow and blow rubbish into the road so the sweeper can collect it. So you'd have one small mechanical taken off the road. The person from that sweeper would go in and join the second person in the large sweeper. So the saving is in the efficiency that the vehicle provides, not the head count.
I see. Okay, thank you. This may be a question for you, it may be a question for JWS. What's the turnaround on replacement bins?
Is that sort of refuse recycling food waste bins that are ordered by residents?
Exactly, yeah.
There is an SLA within the contract to deliver those within
5 days, I believe.
5 working days. So we'd usually expect that to be complied with if a resident places an order to get those in. I think where we might get differences is, for example, if a developer is placing a big order, we try and encourage them to do it far in advance, because the volumes obviously might be quite significant there. But otherwise, yeah, the contract SLA would be an expectation the resident would get it in a week.
So 2 weeks is too long, and having to ask twice is too much?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So that was my experience, that's what I'm saying. And I have asked twice. I've got nothing now. I think the last time I asked was on the 21st of September. So I realize this is a personal experience. So, but if that is reciprocated across the borough and across the JWS sites, then it is worrying. And that is not just my experience. I had someone else contact me to say that wasn't replaced and then wasn't collected. The old one wasn't collected. So I don't know if we've got KPIs for that. but it may be worth having a look at.
We do measure performance under a sort of local performance indicator, but it's not a formal contract KPI that's got sort of financial deductions that apply to it. So it is measured, and Amy do report to us each month on how they're performing against that SLA, but it's not one of the formal KPIs that has financial penalties linked to it. No.
Okay.
I don't know whether Danielle wants to add anything about some work they do to bring in extra support when container volumes are high, for example.
I think just with specifically to the Woking depot, we struggle to stay on top of the bin deliveries more frequently than we do elsewhere, because Woking don't have the support of the street cleansing team to assist with those containers when they do mount up. So in other depots, the street cleansing team are willing to do overtime, etc., to assist with those deliveries, and they have the vehicles to do so. Whereas Woking have just got the one vehicle and one scheduled route with no additional support in terms of doing that. So we farm out the bin deliveries. We subcontract it out to a company called City Sprint, who we book in advance to come in and help us with those deliveries. But there are times when those orders are delayed and not completed within the expected SLA, which we do report into JWS, as Joe said.
It may be worth looking at a KPI for that in particular, then, I don't know. The second comment I've got, and again, this is probably JWS, is renewing the garden waste contract for an individual. It still seems quite clunky to me. It was difficult to find on the web page, on that landing page. It gave the amount that I had to spend and then asked me to fill in the amount as well. And there was an asterisk next to the word reference. Didn't really explain what that reference was. So I just wonder if we could tidy up that garden waste renewal page.
Yes, absolutely. We have a fortnightly meeting with Amy colleagues regarding some of the improvements that sit around the IT. So I can pick that up as part of that, and some where we can look at simplifying areas in the white space forms that residents use in Woking and Surrey Heath. Yeah, happy to take that one on.
Thank you. I've got no other comments at the moment, Ashley.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just a couple more from me then. We had, at our last meeting, we reported that we'd noticed several of the high street bins in several different areas in Elmbridge where they had, where they're dual use collectors. So there's a general refuse and then there's a recycling slot. That the incorrect liners were being used. So it meant that all of the collected waste was being treated as general waste rather than being separated out into two different bags. Has that been tackled, and was that a sort of KPI issue that we weren't actually separating out recycling from general refuse?
I understand, Councillor Tilling, that was dealt with immediately, and also the other depots were checked to ensure that they were using the correct sacks on those street cleansing areas. So I haven't had any further issues raised myself, and we've asked our site supervisors to confirm when they're doing their crew checks that they are making sure that those in those town centre areas are using the correct sacks as well. So we've put a measure in place to make sure that the right process is being followed. Okay,
lovely, good, thank you. And I think, Joe, you were sort of JWS going to try and monitor that.
No, the officer team are out and about in the contact areas on a regular basis. So as part of the sort of range of things that they look for when they're undertaking visits for whatever reason it might be, that is firmly on their list. I will defend them a little bit if they've overlooked anything recently, because we have 2 vacancies in the East team at the moment, so we're recruiting into those. So sort of our presence on the ground is not at its usual volume, but it's certainly, yes, on the officer's radar to be checking those dual recycling bins when they're in town centres and the areas where those are in place.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And the final one from me, as we haven't had an incident on a busy street where there was a dead fox on the pavement. It should be picked up within 24 hours. It was very difficult for the resident to report it. And in the end, I think it got picked up after about 6 days of lying there with, you know, and in that time, lots of kids were walking past it and it was all fairly gruesome after 6 days. I know that, Joe, I think you responded to that, but as an item of feedback, clearly there needs to be a much quicker response, and it may be that the way that residents can report this incident needs to be improved.
Yes, GoGo dealt with that particular incident in terms of responding to sort of the ensuing complaint that obviously arose from the delay in dealing with that issue. So I won't claim to know all the ins and outs of why that went wrong, but as I say, I think the team have investigated it and responded to that particular complainant. The Elmbridge street cleaning forms have recently been integrated with Amy's Whitespace system. So although the depot did have access to reports in the old system very promptly, anything that's logged either via the call centre in Elmbridge or online goes directly into Amy's Whitespace system. So we shouldn't see those sorts of delays because the depot should have that, you know, that job arrive with them immediately. So yes, like I said, I don't know the ins and outs of that particular one, but you know, the system is in place to try and ensure those sorts of things don't happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, thanks. It may well have been something for our Elmbridge call centre to sort out. I think on initial contact, it was a case of, well, no, sorry, we don't deal with waste or something like that, you know, and so it didn't sound as though it was properly reported, so therefore wouldn't have appeared on the Whitespace system for Danielle's team to respond to. So that might be something that we need to look at internally in Elmbridge.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll follow up with the team because as with all the areas, we do have regular meetings with the contact centre representatives. So if there's any areas where we need to, you know, improve communication or update teams in terms of, you know, how they need to work with the systems, then we can absolutely do that.
Good. Thank you. Any other comments or questions for Danielle? Nope. Okay, right. Thanks very much. Thank you, Danielle. And item number 8 is JWS work programme progress update, pages 37 to 44.
Thank you. I will talk you through this, although I won't, you know, there's a lot of detail in the report. There's some highlights pulled out as part of that cover paper, so I won't look to duplicate the information that's there for too long. What I did want to highlight is the change in the report format that we've made. So if you know, for those members that have seen previous versions of this, we hope what's presented here is a slightly clearer and more concise summary of the progress that we're making against the activities in our work programme. So in addition, at the end, to any questions or comments on the report itself, I'd be really happy to take any feedback you have on that, the format now, and see if there's anything else we need to do, or whether you agree that the format is a little bit more easy to digest than it was previously. I just wanted to note as well, as part of the intro here, that we had some feedback last time about not being specific in one of the objectives about the fact that that's where our support to the carbon reduction plan sat. So we've just amended the wording of objective 1 now, just to be clear on that's where those activities sit. So yes, the cover paper gives a summary of the key areas of progress, and as usual, it's a mixture of both our sort of business as usual activities and project delivery updates too, as well as the work of the operations team specifically. It also covers the work that the wider JWSD team do on behalf of the joint contract authorities. As you'll see, it covers up to the end of August. So whilst there's been a lot of activity on some areas, such as service guides, for example, those aren't necessarily documented here because they're still a work in progress, but a lot of communications activities have been taking place, and we've also been doing some significant work on data cleansing and the improvement plan with Amy around the IT systems, and some other issues such as extending our WEEE and textiles disposal contract arrangements. Like I said, I don't want to sort of run through that in any more detail than that. Hopefully you've all had time to read it, and I'm happy to take questions and comments on the content or the format.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Yeah, it is significant that the one red RAG assessment is that the government has pushed back its waste strategy yet again, which is incredibly disappointing. I suppose presumably we still need to do some work. We can sort of anticipate what will be required to collect, and I don't know whether that work needs to be done with our MRFs, so that we are separating out and collecting more of what we can assume will be in the waste management strategy.
I think, obviously this report was written before some of the announcements that have come out most recently about what consistency in collections and or simpler recycling might look like going forward. So I think there are still a lot of unknowns there for us at the moment. We were waiting for outcomes of consultations to give us that clarity and direction of travel that we'd be expected to follow. But I think obviously we're not anticipating that we'll have a huge amount of detail on that immediately. It will be interesting to see what these sort of change in approach means in terms of recycling requirements that collection authorities are required to provide going forwards. And yes, there will be lots of work to do, but I think there's still a lot of uncertainty about what that will entail at the moment. I can see Kelly's put her hand up. She's far more knowledgeable on this than I would be, so I'll let her come in.
Well, far more knowledgeable in that we know what hasn't been said, I think is probably the best position to be. Yeah, I mean, we probably need to kind of rescope this action that's within the work programme, because, the world has moved on, like Joe said, since this was actually first drafted. I think where I'm at now is a lot of this was about, is anything likely to come in the term of this existing contract, or is this stuff that we need to think about when we're tendering for a new contract post 2027? And there was obviously concerns about, how do we get, price certainty over the future, over a new contract, without bidders pricing in risk, because we don't know what that future direction might look like. I've given it more thought, and I have been talking to some consultants to kind of think about the best way forward on this. And I think actually we are in a position where we can scope what a new specification might look like, and if we need to build some flexibility into any tender documentation, we can do that. So I feel, whilst we're still awaiting clarity, I feel as though some of the changes that might materialise won't be as significant as we perhaps first anticipated. And I also feel more comfortable that we can develop it into a tender process without driving the costs will go up, we know that, but without driving the costs up too significantly as a result of uncertainty.
Yeah, yes, I suppose that makes sense, doesn't it? We're going to start a tendering process presumably in a year or so, 2 years possibly. So yeah, a change in the scope would make sense to try and tie in with what might be a decision on the government's waste management strategy and what we might have to collect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other points or questions on that? Yes, Peter.
I mean, just picking up on that, it does strike me that there's lots of speculation, but I think there's a fair amount of clarity on where this will go. So I think it's a good idea to start scoping things now, and I think we'll probably be pretty accurate when it actually when push comes to shove. Yeah, I mean, I've had a read through. There's a huge amount of stuff on the government's website, but it's just that final decision I think we're waiting on. Back to the report. Just a quick one that caught my eye. On page 38, I would mention that. In the last point, it says IT systems improvement. Well, I've already touched on that a little bit. But the right-hand column says Amy continues to work on creating a dashboard capable of invoice generation, KPI, etc. But this is yet to be demonstrated to JWS. I just wonder what we're doing to have that demonstrated to us.
So the work that's being done, I mean, clearly we go through a process of paying invoices and measuring KPIs at the moment, but the way that's done is a lot of data analysis and quite a lot of people time in getting to the conclusions of the right numbers for those invoices and performance measures. So when Whitespace was introduced, there was always the intention to use try and automate that process a lot more, because the data was in a more consistent format across the 4 authority areas compared to the previous system that Amy had in place. And the way the data is collected, it would enable that a little bit more. So Amy's IT colleagues are working on that automated process, or making it as streamlined and automated as possible. I mentioned earlier we have a fortnightly meeting talking about the IT improvements and other aspects around the use of the system. The last update I had was that that was still in development, and contract staff in Surrey were looking at the latest iteration of that to see if they were sort of happy with the principles of how that was working, and there was a little bit more work to be done. So that's why we haven't seen it yet. The next meeting on that is actually this afternoon, so I may know more after that, but hopefully we can get a date in soon, because it would be a real benefit.
Well, but just a quick one on Whitespace. Is it in 2027? Would Whitespace be the platform that we continue with?
So the contract for the use of Whitespace is between Amy and Whitespace, so it's Amy's version of the system. It is a fairly standard industry product. A lot of waste collection companies utilize it, so it may not be the choice of the next service provider, but it may well be. So yeah. Okay,
that's useful information. And just while I'm on the platform, to convey to the operatives or the operative who was injured in this accident, it looks dreadful, and I can't believe that someone's actually driven into an operative who's pushing like 2 garden bins. So Danielle, if you could convey our sympathy to that particular operative. It must have been someone totally careless. So it struck me that we haven't actually mentioned that, but I thought I would. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. That's a good point. And one other question for me. Elmbridge ran a trial on the Rethink Waste scheme last year, and that's been rolled out to other boroughs and districts. I just wonder whether we know what the take-up of the Rethink Waste subscription has been in those other boroughs.
I don't have that information here. It will be coming out as part of the SEP updates, because it's a SEP run project, so the programme updates in those meetings will report in more detail on those. But it looks like Kelly has unmuted, so she might have some numbers to hand.
I do. I was just sitting here nodding, going, I do. I have the latest figures. Essentially, we've seen greater uptake in the areas where there's been kind of direct emails to residents. So where we've made use of, like, the garden waste subscriber lists and things like that, there's obviously been more uptake. So and obviously for Elmbridge, because you were in the trial, the figures will be slightly slower, if you like, because you've already had the benefit of that original uptake. So for Elmbridge for this year, so since the scheme was launched in June, you've had 73, and there haven't been any additional direct emails yet to any mailing lists. For Mole Valley, it's 164, and again, there haven't been any direct emails. For Surrey Heath, it's 362, and there has been a direct email. And for Woking, it's 394, and again, there has been a direct email.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, the significant uptake in subscribers to the Garden Waste scheme in Elmbridge was when we did actually go out to Garden Waste subscribers. Sorry, the significant uptake of the Rethink Waste subscription. So that's definitely worth doing. I think we went up from sort of 700 to 2,000, having advertised it via the Garden Waste subscribers. So that will be a good idea. I think the success of the scheme in Elmbridge was largely due to the fact that we had competition between schools, and a reasonable check for the winning school. It was sort of around about £800 to the school that got the maximum number of points. Are we going to have that sort of competition in the other boroughs and districts? So that I think if you can involve kids and their parents in getting involved in the scheme, I think the take up is much bigger, and it's a much more successful scheme.
Yeah, so there absolutely is going to be. It hasn't triggered yet. I can't remember the exact date. We're doing it in 2 phases. So I think the plan was to do one lot during this autumn term and then another one in the spring term, I believe, but I'd need to check that with Paul. Because we launched the scheme in June, obviously it was right before the school summer holidays, so it wasn't the time to drive a schools competition. But now the schools are back and the kids are hopefully settled in, it's, you know, the time to try and get that going again. So I'd need to check with Paul in the programme exactly when it's coming, but the whole idea is to do it in 2 phases. I'm not sure there'll be competition between schools within districts and boroughs. I think it will be more schools across Surrey as a competition, just because of, you know, the cost of having lots of schools involved and the management, you know, of actually dealing with that. I think the idea is that there'll be 2 or 3 schools within each district or borough that would then, you know, be done in each round, if you like, and then we'd promote it to those areas and try and increase the number of schools engaged throughout the scheme.
Right.
But I can get Paul to provide more details on the strategy on that one.
Yeah. I mean, certainly, comms is really important on that. So if there, you know, if there's council Facebook pages, Twitter feeds, or what are they called now, X feeds, you know, then the more information that we can get to parents and kids, the better, and you get a much bigger take up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? No, I can't see any other hands up. Good. Thank you for that. Right, well, if there are no more questions, then we can close the meeting. If we can just say thank you very much to Catherine, who we now know is going to be moving on in 2 weeks' time from the start of the meeting. So thank you for all your hard work and supporting the meeting so well over the last, whatever it is it years?
About 5 years, yes.
Oh, right. Wow, well done for sticking at it for so long.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Good. So great. With that, we'll close the meeting, and I've got the date of the next meeting is on Thursday, the 14th of December. So there's a little pre-Christmas treat in store for us. So thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance. Thank you for your reports. And with that, we'll say goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.